Ah, there we go. Well, thank you very much for joining me this evening. As ever, lots and lots of people register for a webinar, but when it's 7 p.m. on a UK evening, most people would rather watch the TV and watch the recording, but that's fine too. Um, Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about switches. This will be our first in a series of starting out webinars where we're looking at the basics of switch use and switch assessment and those topics. Um, Along the way, we'll talk about switches. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about touch devices. We'll also talk about pointing devices, head pointing systems, that kind of thing. And eventually we'll finish with eye gaze. So these are foundation level webinars. There are other webinars. If you're a subscriber to the website, there are lots of recorded webinars which look beyond this point to developing a more focused approach, specifically to meet the needs of individual students, and which would move on from cause and effect through to choice making and everything along the way. So do look out for those. One thing to mention: the webinar tonight is being recorded, and the recording, which will be on the website tomorrow. Everybody that's registered will get an email tomorrow with a link telling them where you can watch the recording. If you're a subscriber, there'll be a link directly to the folder where all of the recorded webinars are. If you're not a subscriber, there'll be a link directly to your video and a passcode which you'll need in order to be able to access it. I'm going to use the chat tonight, but as there's only a couple of us, that's fine. So if you do have any questions, do type them in the chat. If you do have any questions, do type them in the chat. I'm constantly monitoring that. I just need to move it across to a different screen. And I'll do my best to answer them. If I don't get around to answer them, I'll make sure I send you an email and answer the question that way. So I think with that said, I'll switch over to my presentation. I'm going to keep jumping back and forward between the presentation and the camera because there's some things I want to show you that are probably better not to use pictures for. So I'll just click that, and we should be there. So tonight's session is entitled Starting Out with Switches, and is designed as a primer, a 101 of what we need to know if we're going to work with switches in our classrooms or therapy centres. We're going to be covering topics like simple assessment, quick and dirty things that you can do in the classroom to try and find a switch that your student can use, and then look at some motivation behind using switches, some of the reasons why we do that in the first place, why that might not be our best choice for a student, and then look at the process through which the students will develop their skills and build on their skills, and from that you'll then be able to set a baseline and set targets which are meaningful, that the student can actually work towards and has some chance of achieving. So that's the plan for this evening. So we might as well make a start, I guess. So best place to start, I guess, is not there. So who uses switches? Why? Who were the people that actually use switches? There was a time 20 years ago when switches were became quite common certainly in special schools in the UK, and they were everywhere. Pretty much everybody was using them. It didn't really matter. It didn't matter whether you had any problems with movement at all. It was just a nice, easy way for children to interact with technology. There was some lovely fun software developed at the time, and pretty much everybody did that. These days we're a little bit more choosy because technology has moved on quite significantly, and there are often better choices for our students than switches. In fact, I would argue that switches are almost always my last choice for a student. So if I can't find anything else to work with, for a student to work with, I usually end up with a switch. That said, there's probably an argument you could say about switches and eye gaze. I think a lot of students who are switch users become candidates for eye gaze, and sometimes that's successful, sometimes that's not, and there's a lot of reasons for that, not least of which that eye gaze requires a different set of skills to be able to understand that by moving your eyes you're able to interact with something on the screen than having a switch with a picture of Bob the Builder on it, and when you press the switch with Bob the Builder plays. So there are levels of abstraction in that which we need to think about carefully. The other reason why they're often the hardest, the last choice for me to choose for a student, is because they're not the easiest way to interact with a computer at all. In some ways, they're the hardest way to interact with a computer because they get progressively very, very difficult. So initially, it's very simple. Student has a switch, we give them a switch, they press the switch, something happens, and at a cause and effect level, the child's interacting with the technology, beginning to develop an awareness of themselves and their ability to extend influence and control over their immediate environment, and all's good. And I see many, many, many students at that stage doing those type of activities. But I also see many students doing those activities that actually could do a lot more. And often the reason why they're not doing more is because, well, there are two reasons. One is that sometimes the staff in school aren't really aware of how to progress this child beyond cause and effect. How do we move them towards being able to make effective and meaningful choices with a switch? And the other reason is because it's quite difficult, because anybody that tells you that step scanning is easy is probably telling you a lie, because it's actually not. It's actually quite a complex skill and requires a reasonably high level of cognition. If you think about what the child might have to do in order to scan something, a box will appear on the screen. It will highlight a particular choice. If the child presses the switch at that point, they would choose the thing that's highlighted. If they don't want that one, they then have to wait and track the box until it moves into the one that they want to choose. All of this requires a level of cognition. It requires relatively good motor skills, certainly for some people, in order to press the switch in the right time before the scan might move on. So using switches is not always my first choice. It's always my last choice for people. However, for a student that has no other meaningful way of interacting with technology, it's all we've got. So it's important that we understand, we get them the right switch with the right type of activities, and provide them with activities which we know will help them progress those skills towards being able to make a choice. Because, and I think this is really important, that we have to understand that before we set out with any assistive technology, but especially with switches, we need to understand why we're doing it in the first place. What's it for? Pressing a switch and something happening on the screen is really nice. And we put Help Kids Learn on, press a switch, the pictures come on, or the bus bounces up and down, and that's lovely. But where does it go? What's it for? What are we trying to achieve with it? And the answer to that question is, and it's a really important thing to bear in mind, is that we want that child to become as independent as they possibly can be, and use that switch to facilitate that independence. And that independence, that switch can also be used to facilitate communication for that student, should the student actually need that. So the switch serves two purposes in essence. It will give access to technology and things, so a child is able to control and take control of things in their life, but also extend their access to communication too. So from Big Macs through to two message communication systems, through to 4 and 8, and then hopefully on to dynamic systems where we have a vocabulary and the child is going in and out of folders with their switch to be able to choose specific words. So the answer to the question who uses switches is People who really can't use much anything else. And yet, if you look at the top of my screen, the middle picture there is a boy and he's using a Big Mac as a switch, and it's connected to a Minion, and there is no way that that child is a switch user. That child would be far better suited with any other type of technology. Looking at how where his hands are, my first choice for him would be to use a touch device, preferably a mobile device, something like an iPad, where touching the screen will make things happen. Putting two things on the screen gives him an instant opportunity to make a choice. He's not a switch user, and yet he's using a switch. The reason for that is because for some students, we use switches simply just to make things easier for them. In that particular activity, they've got a Minion toy. The Big Mac is playing a message. Hey, look at the Minion, and when you press the switch, it plays the message, and then the toy will work for a short length of time. So in some instances, I'll use switches with people who aren't traditional switch users. Often they're very young children when we really first want to get them involved with technology. But somewhere along the line, and that's that highlighted but, somewhere along the line, we're going to have to make a decision about what's the right technology for them. So if we do decide to choose a switch for a student, which switch should we choose? And there are lots of them. And over the years, people have made all manner of switches to do all manner of things. And I've got some on my desk, and I'll just switch the camera off for a second, just so I can show you a couple of them, just to give you an indication of the kind of things that we might see in school. Certainly all of the things that I've got here are the kind of things you'll find in a cupboard somewhere in school. So, okay. So typically the most common switch you'll find in schools is this one. This is a big switch, and it's from a company called AbleNet. It's been around, 25 years probably. It started life as the big red switch, the big blue switch, the big yellow switch, and the big green switch, because the company used to sell different versions, a red one, a yellow one, a green one, a blue one, and people would choose which color they wanted for whatever reason, but specifically by a mix of colors. It's quite a large switch. It's about 5 inches in diameter, large surface area, which is tactile when you press it. Typically it gets put onto a child's tray, and the child will press it. But then again, I've seen it used on people's heads, with their elbows, with their knees, moving their knee out to press the switch. I've seen it mounted upside down like this, and the child's coming up from the desk to press it. This is the most common switch you'll find anywhere. It comes with this, a little plastic cover called a switch cap, and switch caps are really, really useful. So this is my blue switch. Blue switch means it gives me no indication of what's going to happen when I press that blue switch. But if I was to put a picture on there of, let's see if I can find one. If I was to put a picture on there of a singing hippopotamus, and when I press the switch, a singing hippopotamus appears on the screen, that helps a child make the connection between the switch and what's happening on the screen. So switch caps are incredibly useful. They get lost, they get separated from the switch, and often they're kicking around schools in drawers. So if you are looking for switch caps, go search in the cupboards or ask in school for a little amnesty for people to bring switch caps. They're really good. Print a symbol. This one's a choose. I want this one. This one's a cheeky one for a fart noise on my Big Mac. This one is next, or not that one, this one. So there's loads. And certainly with the activities you'll find on my website, there are switch caps for pretty much every activity there that you can download and print. You just need to find a link. I'll put the link in a handout. You can see this is Peppa Pig for a much smaller switch. So that's a big switch, big red switch. It used to be called big switch. The next size, I guess, from AbleNet is this one, which is the jelly bean switch. Again, switch cap, We can pop onto there a picture of what's going to happen, connect that up. We've now got Peppa Pig on the switch, and we can use that. There is one smaller size, which is this one. This one's called a spec switch. It's really quite small, and often you'll see these on people's heads. So if we're using a head switch, it might be small. Sometimes they're used on wheelchairs, and people can just do that with their finger to press them. There's no switch caps for these because often they're not used in a place where you need a prompt. So there are wireless versions too. This is a wireless one. This is a switch. It connects to a little wireless adapter, and this is the wireless adapter. So this bit goes into your computer, and this bit is the switch. I press this, it sends a signal to this wirelessly, and that triggers the activity in the this is, I think, is a beamer, it's called. And they're all great switches. They've all been around for 20 odd years, and they work really, really well. To connect a switch to the computer, you need an interface, and this is where some people fall foul of this. So certainly in not so much in the UK, but certainly in the US, a lot of the switch interfaces, I'll explain what a switch interface actually is. So it's a box like this, and when you plug your switch into here, and this bit goes into your computer. If you're using an iPad with a switch, maybe your switch interface will look like this. This is an applicator. So the switch will go into this socket, and this would talk by Bluetooth to the iPad. This is another one for the iPad. It's called I can't remember what it's called now. Anyway, this one's from AbleNet. Again, we can either use these two switches, or we can plug in our own switches into these sockets here. And this talks to the iPad via Bluetooth. So pressing this switch or pressing a switch in that socket will activate that. But you need an interface. And the issue we have sometimes with the PCs is that what does it send? What does it actually do? Well, the little one that I just showed you, the inclusive one, it has two sockets, and it sends only two things. It sends a space and an enter. And you can actually see that's written on the device there. So space and enter. Switch 1, switch 2. So if you're using basic cause and effect software, if you plug this in and plug a switch into space, it'll work as switch 1. If you're going to use two switches, so for step scanning or something like that, it would need space and enter. Switch 1 for space, for move, and switch enter for choose. The issue we have often with schools in the US, and I get lots of emails from colleagues saying, why won't this work with a switch? And it's because almost all switch software uses space and enter, but a lot of switch interfaces that were sold in the US don't send space and enter. They actually send mouse clicks. Now with cause and effect software, that's great because it will work fine. You plug it into left click, and you press the switch, and it will work absolutely fine. The problem comes when you start to do step scanning. If you're using two switches, the right mouse button, certainly in Windows, has a special function. That function is to bring up a context menu. So if you right click with the right click on a PC, you'll get a menu, and that's what will happen if you press the second switch, even in the software. So we often have problems. So if you are going to buy a switch interface, make sure that it sends space and enter. The one I use all the time, and I should mention I have no commercial interest in any of these companies at all. They don't pay me to talk about them. I talk about Kit only because I've used it for a long time and because it's been successful for me. So the one I use all the time is this one. This is called the Hitch, and I think it's from AbleNet. And the clever thing about this one is you can decide what it sends. So it will send, on level 1, it will send left click, right click, middle click, and on set 2, it will send space, enter, left click, right click, double left click. On set 3, it will do up arrow, down arrow, left arrow, right arrow, and enter. Why would you want those? Well, because PowerPoint works with those. So if you're making an activity for a child in PowerPoint, and you put the switch into right arrow, the socket for right arrow, you press the switch and it will move through each of the slides. And then the last ones are S1, S2, S3, S4, and therefore things like joysticks for clicker. Mentioning clicker make their own. This is the USB switch interface made by Crick. It has 4 sockets. I've never come across a program in 25 years that actually needs 4 switches. So 2 of those are absolutely redundant. They don't do anything. Won't be able to use them for anything. So there's not much you can do about it. You're going to have to pay for it anyway. But they won't do anything. Likewise, if we look at the hitch, we've got 5 sockets on there, and we're only ever going to use 2 of them. So this one, the Crick box, has where with the hitch box, we decide which setting we want to put it on. The Crick box does something quite clever. The Crick box actually has a database of common switch software. So if you were to load up something from Inclusive Technology, Big Bang, for instance, the software for the switch box would recognize Big Bang and set the switch up to work with Big Bang. You just need to remember to plug it into socket 2 and not socket 1. So if you're only using one switch, it goes in socket 2, not 1, because everybody would think of that, not. So you'd need an interface like this, and it doesn't matter whether you're using a PC or a Mac, you'll need an interface, or if you're using a mobile device like the iPad or Android devices, you will certainly need an interface in order to do that. This one seems to be the one that most people are quite keen on at the moment. It's from a company called Praetorian. It's called the Applicator. Talks to the iPad with Bluetooth, as I mentioned earlier. Again, it's got 4 switch sockets, of which you're only ever going to use 2. But it's really good in the sense that it will work with what we call operating system level switching stuff. So the stuff that's built into the iPad. It'll also work with simple switch apps like those that Inclusive Technology make. So that's really cool for that. This is an older version. All right, it's called the Bluetooth. This is Bluetooth version 1 with these strange looking foot pedal kind of pads. And this is the Bluetooth version 2. And I know they're actually working on a Bluetooth version 3, so there may be an up-to-date version of that. Again, this allows you to plug switches into there. It's rechargeable. You plug a USB into there to charge the battery up. And you can set the functions of this, again, exactly how you want. Actually, if you plug the USB into there and into your computer, you can use this as a switch interface on the computer too. So switch interfaces are necessary if you're going to use that with a switch with a computer. If you're going to use it with toys and things like that, all you really need is this. So this is a straightforward toy cable. And what that does is it will allow you to connect switches or communication devices directly to a toy. So let's just grab this switch here. So I've got a jelly bean switch here, and I'm going to just plug that into this toy, this little dinosaur toy here. So switch goes into there.
Want to learn to roar like I do?
And off he goes.
Turn your head to the side and go,
That's a better.
Wait, or was it right?
So press the
They
switch.
say 2 roars are better than 1. Roar with me. Ready?
It doesn't really do much, this toy. It's not one of my favorite toys at all. But that's all you really need. You either need a switch to connect it to that. If you're using a big Mac, like we saw in the picture earlier, we just use that cable to plug into the switch socket here and plug into the toy at the end of that cable, and then that would connect those two together. If you're going to use electrical devices, you need one of these, and this is PowerLink. There are different versions of this. The most common one, I think, in the UK is a green one, but I've certainly seen this type in loads of schools, both here and across the world. So what happens with that is we plug an electrical device into here, and we plug our switches into. There's the switch sockets gone, one on each side here, and one on that side there. So I plug a switch into there, a light into there. I press the switch, and the light will come on. We can alter and adjust the way that the switch works by using some of these things, and I'll put in the handout how we do that. So if you're not familiar with how to do that, it will be there. So you need some form of interface between the switch. With the toy, it's simple. We just connect a cable to it. The power link will decide what's going to happen when you press the switch when it's connected to a mains device like a bubble tube or a light. The computer needs a little box to tell the computer what to do with the switch. So when the switch is pressed, all the box does is pretend you're pressing the space bar. So if you are using a piece of switch software and you want to see if it works, you can just press the space bar, and that's the same as pressing switch 1. And if you press the enter key, that's the same as pressing switch 2, which actually is quite useful for us, because often I get messages from parents who say, I'd really like to do some of that switch stuff at home. What do I need? And of course, a switch box like the Crick box, the one from this one, costs about $120, or about £110, something like that. So that's quite expensive, and a switch is about another $30, maybe a little bit more than that, about £30 too. So so it's quite expensive to do that, where a keyboard isn't, and pretty much every home that has a PC has a keyboard. So if the child's able to use their hands, I often get them just to press the space bar, just initially, just to get going and see if that's going to be useful for them. There are loads of other types of switches. These are all from a company called Liberator, and effectively they're copies of the AbleNet switch. You've got the big switch, you've got their version of the Jelly Bean switch, and you've got their version of the Spec switch. I don't like these at all. I really don't. I think they have this system where you can unscrew the top to change the switch cap. You can see that's pressing now, but doesn't feel very good. But if you tighten this up too tight, it makes the switch almost impossible to press, and there's very little feedback. I don't particularly care for them at all. They're coming from a company called Liberator, and I'm sure somebody from Liberator will be, when this video goes live, somebody will be in touch with me saying I'm doing it all wrong. I've used them with students. I find the amount of pressure that's needed to press them is often too much for students with limited movement. In schools, you'll often see switches like this. The company that makes these no longer makes them. However, there are loads of them in schools. That's the switch cap fall on the floor. There's loads of them in schools. They're called adjustable pressure switches. Again, they're copies of the original AbleNet design, big switch, Jelly Bean switch. What's unique about these is that the top spins. So if I turn this way, all the way to that way, to the left, to the right, the switch is incredibly difficult to press now. If I turn it all the way to the left, it's very, very light and very easy to press. All the way to the right, very hard. And the idea behind them was that you could adjust the amount of pressure that the child had to press. It was almost like they were doing a bit of bodybuilding. So a child's able to press that now. Let's see if we turn it up a little bit harder, they'll put a bit more pressure on, and we'll build up their strength with doing it. When a child's using a switch is just a means to an end. It's a way for the child to interact with something. And the last thing we want to do is make it any more difficult than it needs to be. So if you've got one of these, just put it on its lowest settings, so it's very easy to press, and give the child it. Remember your switch cap, and away you go. These type of switches, again, copies of the big switch and the Jelly Bean switch. These are from Praetorian Stroke Inclusive Technology, and these are called smoothie switches, and I'm not keen on them either, largely because if you look at any of the big switches or the stuff from AbleNet, you can see it has this quite large shoulder on it, which means that I can hold this and offer it to a student can press it. These don't. They're very smooth and they're very rounded, and they're quite difficult to hold. So if I want to give this to a student to press, I kind of got to hold it flat in my hand and do that. Sometimes it presses from the top really easy, but from the side it won't actually activate. Not great. So I'm not interested in those at all. There are wireless versions of them. So this is a wireless version. And this uses a little USB pen, a little stick that plugs into the PC as its interface. So you buy this type of switch with the interface as USB. Sounds great, except can you see all this text on the back of there? I know you won't be able to read it, but I'll read some of it for you. It says 0 gamepad 1, 1 gamepad 2, 2 gamepad 3, 3 gamepad 4, 4 left click, 5 right click, 6 drag lock, 7 space, 8 enter, 9 tab, A tilde 1, B tilde 3, C F7, D F8. Do you know what any of that means? What this means is there's a little LED on here, really quite small. You can see it there, just in that corner there. A little LED, and by pressing that little red button, you change that LED from 0 through to U. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, blah, blah, blah. And you change it to the letter or the number that corresponds to what you want it to send. Now, the big problem with this is two problems. The first one is you have to know what that means. So you have to know what the software wants to receive. So I told you that most cause and effect software needs space. So this needs to be set on number 7 for space. If it's not set on number 7, the cause and effect software won't work, because it's not sending a space and the software won't work. So it requires people to understand what this means, and that for me is difficult. I think one of the big problems with assistive technology over the years has been that it's been the province of kind of techie people like me. 25 years ago, I was developing stuff like this, trying to understand and come up with these kind of things. But then as they go out into classrooms, you realize that the more complicated they are, the more you put things like this on the back of switches, and the more function they have, the less likely it is that people are actually going to use them, because most people look at that, they don't know what to press, so they'll just go through them and then they'll give up before they even get to 7. The other problem with this switch is it uses a tiny battery, so it uses a CR32 battery. So you have to take the switch back apart in order to get change the battery, which means when you mount it, it's really, really difficult to mount, because there's no real mounting on the back here. So I've already said it's not particularly easy to hold it, and it's really difficult to mount it. By far, it would be much easier just to use a jelly bean switch from AbleNet to do that, where you've got the shoulder to hold it, you've got a switch cap that can go over the top of it, and you don't have to worry about batteries or anything like that. There are a couple of others, and then I want to move on. So you'll often see switches like these. These are, this is called a PAL pad switch, and it actually has no moving parts whatsoever. You can see it's just got my name on the back, and it works simply by touch. So when your finger touches the switch, or any part of your body touches the switch, it will activate. You don't have to put any pressure on it, just literally touch it. And these are really good for people who don't have very much movement, so or will only touch the switch very, very lightly. So they're really good for that. They come in all sorts of different sizes. This is the equivalent of what would be a big switch, and this is the equivalent of what would be PAL pad, jelly bean switch. So large and small. They also have a really, really cool feature, which is nothing whatsoever to do with switch building switch skills. But if you get one of these switches here, and you plug that into your Big Mac here, you can then, if this is a Big Mac step by step, if you record the pages of a simple story and put the switch at the bottom of the back page of the book, every time the child presses the page, it will read a message from the from the big map. Makes lovely interactive storybooks that will. I'll show you a couple more and then we'll move on. So this one is called a leaf switch, and you can see it's a little kind of bendy thing. And often you'll see this, people might have that on their chin, they may have it on the side of their head. Sometimes you'll see it on somebody's legs or their arms, so the arm might move out and just move from the midline or in towards the midline just to press it. Occasionally I'll see people who put this on the end of a child's tray and the child will be swiping it. In fact, one school actually told me it was called a swipe switch. It's not, it's a leaf switch. And if this is the kind of movement you ask your child to do, that's not great. And the child won't do that for very much because A, it's tiring, and B, they may hurt their hands when they hit the tray accidentally. So, and then there are other kinds of switches like this one. This is a very tiny micro switch, which you can just press with a little finger. Again, this could be mounted on the head. You notice that this isn't red or yellow or green or blue because not everybody wants this to advertise the fact that they're using a switch. It may well be that this is mounted on somebody's head, or it may well be it's mounted on a wheelchair and they just use their finger just to push the switch like this. So, but there are loads. There are even switches that look like Oreo cookies. There's a switch that looks like a squeaky frog. Made from squeaky toys. There, every kind of switch. Switches which detect proximity, switches which detect muscle movements in your face or in your body, switches that will do all sorts of things. Choosing the right one means thinking about assessing the child. Now, the first thing I want to say about assessment is that it's not an exact science, despite the fact what people might tell you it's not. Because every child that we see is different and unique, and in the way that they move, in the way that they present, in their behavior, in what motivates them, in what everything to do with that child. The chair they're sitting in, it may be different. There are some common things though, and that's thinking about, are we able to move our hands? If we can't move our hands, are we able to move our legs? If we can't move our legs, are we able to move our head? Those movements that we're looking for need to be reliable. In other words, we find a movement and we use the head, and it's going to have that tomorrow and the day after. So it's not just something you can do today. It needs to be repeatable because the child's going to be pressing a switch a lot of times, especially if they're step scanning, where they might press the move switch 3 times to get to the one that they want, and the choose switch once to select the one that they want. So reliable, repeatable, and consistent. In other words, that it's not going to change. We're not that things aren't going to be. You're not going to have to constantly be changing switches and all of that. We need to look for consistency. It's not always easy to find those kind of things. I don't want to get too deep into switch assessment in there because it's quite in-depth kind of thing. So I'm going to put a link to a document in the handout. In fact, I'll put the document in the handout. It's certainly the best kind of rough guide to switch assessment that I've seen. I wrote one years ago, and the very same day that I finished writing it, I met a child who blew the whole thing out of the water. I had to start writing it again. Every child's different, and we'll. But there are some things which we need to think about. First thing is, if we're going to do an assessment, child needs to be comfortable with the technology that's around them. It must be really scary for a child to suddenly be sat in their chair and people start clamping things all around and things that they don't know, and especially when there's strange people like me coming into school to do that. So we need to make sure that they're comfortable. The child needs to be in their normal seating. So because we want them to use their switch all day long in school. It's an important part of switch progression, is that we understand that we need to provide opportunities throughout the day for the child to practice that. So their normal seating is best. If the child the only way the child is going to be able to press the switch is in a standing frame, then you're not going to get very many opportunities to use the switch throughout the day. So try and find something around the child's seating if you possibly can. Try and identify those movements. That movement will often dictate the type and position of the switch. The child can use their hands like this, put their hand out like this, then we might have big switch on the tray. If not, if they can keep their hand on the tray, but they can move their hand up, but not out, we can mount the switch above it, and they can come up to hit it. And gravity will take their hand away from the switch. We can use angled mounts with switches, so we can press and then our hand will slide off. Lots, and in the handout I'll detail all of those things. It's not an exact science. It really isn't. You might find a switch and the child might use that switch for a little while, and then something will change and you need to review it. And you may need to completely rethink the whole thing. There will be times, and I guarantee it, there will be times and there will be children that you come across where you just will not be able to find a switch movement for them. Or you'll get something, and then next week something will have changed. The child will have had maybe more of baclofen, muscle relaxants, or they may be ill or not feeling very well or hungry and not really in the way. They might lose a little bit of coordination. Their muscle tone might be very poor. There's a whole load of things that can go wrong. The secret is not to beat yourself up over it. You know, if you can't find a switch position for a child, so what? Use something else. It doesn't have to be a switch. In fact, they don't have to press the switch. They just need to indicate that they want to press the switch, and then maybe one of the other children could press the switch for them in that initial period while we're trying to get something sorted out for them. If you fail, don't blame yourself. I say this, and I've written it in bold, in big letters, because for months and months, I used to go home every night from school and beat myself senseless about a student in my class, a young lad called Zulfi, who had quite severe cerebral palsy and a really poor muscle tone. And it's very, very difficult to get a switch movement that actually made any sense and that he could do. And we find it, we'd get it, we think we've absolutely cracked it, and then next week it would be completely different. And it was because of his medication was constantly changing, his condition was changing. I used to beat myself up senselessly over it. And I was once sat in the staff room and I was really, really cross with myself because I wasn't able to fix this kid. And one of my colleagues said, "Look, what did he used to do before all this switch stuff?" I say, "He was really brilliant, with the e-trans frame. He used to do lovely eye pointing." And the teacher just looked at me and I just looked at him and the penny dropped. I went back to doing e-trans frame and just forgot about the switches. We were never going to win with a switch. We used our e-trans frame. We built up his skills with his eye pointing, and had this been 2020 and not 2002, we would have been on an eye gaze machine by now. So, don't beat yourself up over those kind of things. Okay, so the last thing is to make sure that we understand the child. So what I mean by that is, the more we know about them, the better it is. What makes them laugh? What do they look at? What sounds do they like? And I used to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to identify motivators for children. I'd ask their parents, I'd find music. That's why on my website, all of the activities all feature known motivators. Music from films, characters from TV shows, cartoons that children watch, pop stars that they listen to. All of those things you'll find on there. It's because it's much more likely, if the student is familiar with that and enjoys it, that they're much more likely to want to use a switch with it. So, so for our assessment goals are very simple. They're simple to say, they're not always simple to do. So assessment goals are say, access the technology. We want the child to be able to develop accuracy and efficiency. In other words, maximum output for minimal physical effort. If pressing a switch is really hard work, a child is not going to do it. Remember that repeatable word in the reliable and repeatable. So developing accuracy and efficiency. We'll need to think about access to learning. So if we're going to choose a technology for somebody, we need to choose the technology that best meets their needs and provides the widest access to learning materials it possibly can. So for a switch user, that means access to activities at all different levels of switch progression. The sad thing is right now that lots of children use switches with iPads, and there really isn't enough quality apps to add any breadth at all to that teaching experience. Certainly once we get beyond cause and effect, there's very, very little. And the third of those goals that we need to consider are access to communication. Using a switch often provides access to communication devices. And if we're thinking about using switches with communication devices, think about devices which offer open-ended progression. In other words, if we go through it, we're going to use short message devices, use a Big Mac, then a Big Mac step by step, then maybe two Big Macs or an iTalk 2 and then an iTalk 4, and build on a progression to build up the amount of words and vocabulary that the child's able to access with their switch. Once we've found a switch and once we know the child can press it, we then need to identify where their baseline is. Now this is where it gets relatively more fun than anything we've done previously. So on the website and in the handout, you'll find the document on the right-hand side of that screen. It's a switch assessment record sheet, and it lists 10 level descriptors for switch progression, and then I'll explain them as we go along. So the first of those would be an experiential learner. So a learner that's not interacting with a switch. It's there, but they don't know what it's for. They're not pressing it. A learner who is learning to look at the screen, listen to what's happening, and respond hopefully positively to that. And then we would move through cause and effect, and there are 4 different ways of working with cause and effect with a switch. And then we would then make a decision about where we were going to go in terms of scanning, how we were going to go about making a choice with that. So first and most important thing, and I'm repeating myself, is use activities that we know the child will enjoy engaging with. So find out what makes them laugh, find out the things that they enjoy and use those. Secondly, don't limit yourself to the computer. So use computer, use communicators, use toys, use a power link, use anything that works. And there are many occasions that when I've used a switch with a student that isn't actually plugged into anything. So I'll have a switch, and every time they press the switch, I'll just go ow, like I've been electrocuted in the bottom. And the child will press it again. I'll jump up and do ow, and we'll have a lovely session of the child pressing the switch to make me jump up and down. I've used a Big Mac with the noise boom on, and whenever it goes boom, I'll jump, pretending I've been startled, and the child will press that and make me jump. We've had fart noises and sneezes and all of those things. So use whatever works. It doesn't necessarily, don't limit yourself to a specific device. Start with experiential activities. In other words, activities that don't require the student to press a switch, and then we'll work our way through each of those level descriptors until we find the one where the student would struggle. So that would be the place where we need to back from. So I'll just show you quick examples of activities at those levels. So this is an activity called Sense Switch, and it actually has experiential levels. So I'm going to choose here experiential shapes. If you haven't seen this program, it's been around. I designed this program 22 years ago, and it's still one of the most popular cause and effect early switch use programs available anywhere. So we can choose any of these that we want. I'm just going to have this star here. And I'd really like the star, I think, to be orange. And I'd really like the background to be, let's do it this way. Let's have a black star with a yellow background, really high contrast. This allows me to decide how long the animation is going to play. Remember, the student's not going to be required to press the switch. It's just going to happen. I shall turn 2 on. I'll have that one and that one. And when I press go, 10 seconds of animation. Here we go. The object's just playing, this activity will continue to play for 10 seconds and then the next activity will play. So SenseSwitcher provides opportunities for experiential activities. What I like to do with experiential activities, I have the switch plugged in and I offer the child a try. So they're watching, we're looking at it, look, watch, look at the star. And then I'll say, your turn, and I'll offer the switch, and if the child presses the switch, we'll have the star move for them. So I offer turns. And now you work your way through. SenseSwitch is available on the website. It's free. You can just download it. Then we move into cause and effect. 4 ways of using cause and effect. The first one is press and hold the switch. Now that's toys. So you get a switch, you plug it into your walking dog or your grunting pig or whatever it is. Child holds their hand down on the switch and the toy works. When they take their hand off, it stops. There's very little software that works at that level. Far better to use a power link with music or with lights or a toy that would walk or move or do something while you hold the switch down. Second of those is press and let go, and that's typically the way that more switch software works. So this is an example of a press and let go type activity. I'm going to choose a green switch because why not? Well, there's my switch prompt. Child presses the switch.
Baby shark, do 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 do. Baby shark, do do.
That's enough, baby shark. Press the switch, let go, and the activity will play for a set length of time, and then it will stop. The third of those is press it again. That's an activity where you might need to press the switch over and over to keep something going. So you press it, a little piece of music plays, it stops, you press it again, and again you'll find activities like that on the website. And the fourth of those cause and effect type activities is a latching activity. You press the switch, the light comes on, and it will stay on until you press the switch again to turn it off. Then we move into experiencing 2 switches. So one of the ways we do that is offer the child 2 switches to press. And here's an example of an activity like that. So I've got 2 activities. I've got minions on this switch, and I can change that to whatever I want. Let's stick with, let's have Mickey Mouse on there, and let's have Moana on switch 2. You can change the color of the switch to match your switch, should you want to do that. And you can see now, if I press switch 1, I'll get Mickey Mouse. If I press switch 2, I'll get Moana. I'm going to press switch 2. Gives the child an opportunity to choose by pressing this switch or that switch or this one. And then we get into more complicated stuff like learning to scan. And there's certainly more about learning to scan on the website. Certainly some of the other webinars will cover that in quite some detail, so I'm not going to spend too much time with that. The secret here is to work through each level one at a time and try those activities with the student until we can identify where their baseline is, the kind of thing that they can do but just, and that's where we start. And you might need to model what's required, and I do that quite often, and I'll offer the child a turn and see where we go. Once I've identified the baseline, you then need to think about target settings. So if I've got a student and they are at let's say they're at a cause and effect level, and I want them to begin to make choices. Their target would be experience 2 switches. Student can differentiate between the actions of 2 switches. Examples include choosing a preferred activity by selecting a switch from a choice of 2. And the activity I just showed you will do exactly that. That is number 6. You'll see on the bottom of the screen there that there are green numbers. So if you're on my website and look at any of the activities on my website, they'll always be accompanied by numbers. And those numbers relate, the green ones with the switch relate to switch descriptors. Then there's eye gaze descriptors, there's touch descriptors, and there's pointing device descriptors. And if you look at the descriptor, find out where the student's at from their baseline, and then you can choose activities based on that number. So I need activities that support number 6. If I was to open up a web browser, just do now, and I do this, there we go to resources. If I go to choosing activities, you'll see that these activities support, you can see there, activities at level 6. If you're working at 9 and 10, there are those. If you're working at 9, 10, there are those. All of the activities on the website will link to a specific level. You can see here, this is motivators, and they work with levels 1 and 3 for switches. So it makes it really easy for you, not only once you've set a target, to be able to choose activities that you know will contribute towards a child making progress. So use the level descriptor guides to set targets, use the number system to choose appropriate software. But don't be tied to the computer or the device that you're using. Provide a breadth of experience. That means using the toys, using the single message communicators, using your PowerLink, and having fun with it, but providing opportunities to use that switch across a wide range of contexts. And certainly if you're working at a cause and effect level, don't move on until you're absolutely sure that that student has an understanding of cause and effect, that they know that they're pressing the switch, and that reward that happens is them pressing it and being able to make that the choice, that they understand that they're able to control that device by pressing the switch. It's quite a complex thing. It's quite abstract, and some students may struggle with it for quite a while. I've had students that never grasp the concept of it. A switch would be on the tray, the child would accidentally bang the switch, music would start to play, the child would fixate on the music and look at the screen, but they never made the connection between the switch and what was happening on the screen. Other students might get that really, really quickly. But be reflective and make sure that you're absolutely sure. Cause and effect is almost like the foundation stones on which we build everything else. If the student doesn't understand that they can extend influence and control over the things in their environment, if they don't know that they can control something, it's very difficult for them to be able to move on with that device because they don't know that they can control things. So that's just a kind of, I guess, a quick look at the very basics of using switches in the classroom. Like I said earlier, there are a whole series of learning modules on the website. There's also a whole series of recorded webinars, so using switches at cause and effect level, moving beyond cause and effect level, switch skills progression, the switch progression roadmap, if that's the particular level descriptor system that you use. All of those you'll find on the website. In the handout that I'll send you, it'll probably be the weekend now because I've got a very busy week this week. In the handout there will be all of the level descriptors we've talked about tonight, plus a whole lot of information about assessment and baselining, and some information about the types of switches that we would do. I suppose I just going to mention one thing I should have mentioned when we were talking about switches and that's don't buy a switch assessment kit. I know a lot of companies kind of get a lot of switches, put them all into a very nice little suitcase and sell them for $1,000. Don't buy one of those. The kind of switch that 90% of the students that you come across will use will be this one. And in your switch assessment kit, you'll have one of these. In fact, when we used to sell them at Inclusive Technology, we would put 4 switches that people would use and fill the rest of the box up with things that we couldn't sell. Very obscure things that nobody is ever going to need. Don't buy one of those. Use the switches that you've got. If you need something specialist, you're not sure about anything, there are lots of people like me who will be able to offer that device. In fact, I'm always open. Just use my email address. It's on the website. or the contact form on the website if you need to have any questions whatsoever about using switches or the type of switch or if something is available or not for a specific student. So I think at that point I'm going to stop. Not next week, but the week after, I think we'll be talking about touch devices and looking at starting out with touch devices, where we look again at the differences between small devices, mobile devices, and large things like interactive whiteboards, the way people develop touch skills. Now that's quite important, that we understand that our fingers are magic and that they can do things. And then again, looking at how we can move a child on to being able to make a choice with that. So I think that's probably enough for tonight. So I just want to say thank you very much for joining me this evening. It's already dark here and it hasn't been a great day. So thank you for giving up your time. Enjoy whatever's left of your day, and hopefully I'll see you again on another webinar soon. Thank you very much and good night.